It started like any other quiet afternoon. The kids were doing their homework at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence between pencil scratches and sighs of boredom. Outside, the sky had turned a little gray, heavy with the kind of clouds that promised rain but never delivered. I was rinsing dishes thinking about what to cook for dinner when my phone buzzed on the counter. At first, I didn't bother checking, probably a spam message or one of those neighborhood watch alerts that people rarely read. But something, a small, uneasy pull inside my chest, made me glance at the screen. It was a message from my neighbor, Mrs. Parker. "Get out of here if you want to live." My heart skipped. For a moment I just stared, waiting for another message. A punchline, an explanation, something. None came. Only those words, bright and bold against the pale background, burning themselves into my eyes. I looked toward the window. Her house stood across the street, its curtains drawn tight. The front door was closed. Nothing seemed unusual. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. Maybe she meant to send it to someone else, maybe it was some sick joke. Mrs. Parker was a sweet woman. Quiet, gentle, and not the type to say something so dramatic. Still, something about the message didn't sit right. I picked up the phone, my hands slightly trembling, and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. "Mrs. Parker, it's May," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just got your message. Are you okay?" I hung up, waiting for a reply that didn't come. The kids noticed something was off. "Mom, what's wrong?" Emma asked, her 10-year-old eyes wide with curiosity. "Nothing, sweetie," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a weird text." But inside, a storm had already started brewing. I opened the blinds slightly, scanning the street. The whole neighborhood looked still, eerily still. The usual sounds of laughter, dogs barking, and distant cars were gone. Even the wind seemed to have stopped moving. I texted her back. "What do you mean? Is everything okay?" No response. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Each second stretched longer than the last. My mind began to play tricks. Every creak in the house, every shifting shadow, every silence felt unnatural. I turned on the TV, hoping for a distraction, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Maybe there was a gas leak? A local threat? A police alert? I checked my news app. Nothing. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nonsense. But then the lights flickered. Once, twice. And then I heard it. A faint sound from outside, like metal dragging across asphalt. I froze. "Mom?" Emma whispered again. "It's fine," I murmured, though my voice betrayed me. I looked out the window once more. Mrs. Parker's front door was open now. Just barely, like someone had cracked it from the inside and left it that way. That was when I knew this wasn't a prank. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. I grabbed my phone again and texted my husband, who was working the late shift. "Something weird is happening across the street. Mrs. Parker told me to leave. Please call me." Before I could hit send, another buzz came through. A new message from her number. But it wasn't words this time. It was a photo. The picture was dark and grainy, but I could make out the shape of her living room. Overturned furniture, shattered glass on the floor, and what looked like a smudge of something on the wall. Blood. I couldn't breathe. My knees felt weak, like they might give way any second. "Kids, grab your jackets," I said suddenly, my voice sharper than I intended. "We're going to the car." "But why? Now?" I snapped, and they jumped at the tone. I didn't even lock the door behind us. The air outside felt thicker, heavier, like the whole street was holding its breath. I kept glancing at Mrs. Parker's house, hoping to see her, hoping to see anyone, but the place was silent. We got into the car, and as I turned the key I caught a glimpse of something in my rearview mirror. A shadow moving near her porch. Too tall to be her. Too slow. That was when the fear truly set in, cold, paralyzing, and real. I drove off without looking back. 10 minutes later, sirens began to echo from down the road, and though I was miles away by then, holding my children close in a grocery store parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that the warning had saved our lives, and that whatever had happened back there wasn't over yet. The sirens echoed behind me like a haunting chorus, growing fainter as I drove further away from the neighborhood that had once felt so safe. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles pale under the dashboard light. The kids sat quietly in the back seat, sensing my fear even though I hadn't told them the truth. Emma clutched her little brother, Luke, who was only 6. He had his stuffed dinosaur pressed against his face, murmuring something about how he didn't want to leave his toys behind. His voice cracked through the silence, fragile and innocent, a sharp contrast to the chaos spinning in my head. Where could we even go? My husband, James, wasn't answering his phone. Every call went straight to voicemail. I thought about driving to the police station, but what would I even say? My neighbor texted me to run for my life. It sounded insane. But then again, so did everything that had happened tonight. The rain started, soft at first, then heavier, blurring the windshield, forcing me to slow down. My mind kept replaying that photo. Mrs. Parker's living room. The overturned furniture, that dark smear on the wall. The message, "Get out if you want to live." Something terrible had happened, and part of me feared it wasn't over. I pulled into the nearest gas station, under a flickering light that buzzed with electricity. It felt safer being somewhere bright, somewhere public. I turned off the engine, and for a moment I just sat there, trying to breathe, to make sense of it all. "Mom, are we okay?" Emma asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart." I lied again, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're just waiting for Daddy to call us back." But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every passing car made me tense. Every shadow beyond the light made my stomach tighten. I checked the mirrors again and again, nothing but rain and reflections. Still, I couldn't calm down. After a few minutes, I decided to text the neighbor group chat. Maybe someone else had heard from Mrs. Parker. Maybe she wasn't the only one who sent a warning. I typed quickly, "Did anyone hear from Mrs. Parker tonight?" She sent me a really strange message. Seconds later, a reply popped up from one of the neighbors, "Mr. Lee." There was no name, no contact photo, just the message. Simple, cold. I felt my heart racing. Someone knew I left. Someone was watching. Without thinking, I turned around, looking out every window. Nothing. No one. Just the heavy rain, beating against the glass. "Mom, what's wrong?" Emma asked again, this time more afraid. I forced a shaky smile. "Nothing. Just, don't move, okay?" I stepped out of the car into the rain. The cold drops hit my skin like needles, but I needed to see, to make sure no one was out there. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars and a flickering neon sign from the convenience store. I stood there for a moment, my phone still in my hand, watching, waiting. Then, a sound. A faint ping. Like metal striking metal. It came from behind the gas station. I took a step back, heart pounding, and hurried into the store. The fluorescent lights felt blinding after the darkness outside. The clerk, a young man barely 20, looked up in surprise. "Everything okay, ma'am?" he asked. I hesitated. "Do you have security cameras outside?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, why? Can you check if anyone's been around the pumps or behind the station in the last few minutes?" He frowned but turned the monitor toward me. The feed showed the empty parking lot, the pumps, the edge of the dark alley behind the store. Then, just for a moment, a figure flashed across the screen, tall, hooded, walking quickly before vanishing out of frame. My breath caught. "That's behind here?" He nodded. "About 2 minutes ago." I looked at the time, exactly when I had heard the sound. I didn't wait for more. I thanked him and rushed back to the car. My hands shook as I unlocked the doors and climbed in. The kids looked terrified now. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma asked, voice trembling. I didn't want to tell her, but I couldn't lie anymore. "Someone's out there, honey. We just need to stay calm." I started the car again, glancing at the mirror. The lot looked empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was close, too close. I turned onto the main road and headed toward the city lights, the rain pounding hard. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw another notification pop up on my phone screen, one that made me nearly lose control of the car. A new message from Mrs. Parker's number. "Don't go home." My throat went dry. How could she be texting me now? The police sirens I heard earlier, was she okay? Or was someone else using her phone? I wanted to believe she was alive. I wanted to believe she had escaped whatever horror had happened in that house. But deep down, something inside me whispered that wasn't the case. 10 minutes later, I reached the edge of town and pulled over beneath an overpass. The rain slowed to a drizzle. I checked the phone again. Another message had arrived. This time, it was a video. I hesitated before pressing play. The screen flickered, showing what looked like my house. My front porch light still on. My curtains still drawn. The camera moved shakily, as if someone was filming from across the street. Then, slowly, the camera turned, showing my empty driveway. My husband's car still parked there. And then, him. A tall man standing in my front yard, holding something metallic in his hand. He looked straight at the camera for a brief second, and though the image was blurry, I could see his eyes, cold, emotionless. The video ended abruptly. I dropped the phone, unable to breathe. Whoever he was still there. And somehow he knew where we were supposed to be. The fear that followed wasn't just for myself anymore. It was for my children, for whatever darkness had found its way into our quiet little neighborhood, and was now hunting us down. But for a few seconds after that video ended, I couldn't move. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the rain dripping from the overpass above us. I could still see that man's face in my mind. Those cold, lifeless eyes staring through the camera as if he knew exactly who would be watching. Emma was crying quietly now, trying to be brave but failing. Luke had fallen asleep with his head on her lap, unaware of the storm we'd been dragged into. I wanted to cry too, to scream, to let the fear swallow me whole. But I couldn't. I didn't have that luxury. I was their mother, and that meant I had to keep them safe. I took a shaky breath and started the car again, forcing my thoughts to slow down, to focus. I needed a plan. Going home was out of the question, that much was clear. Whoever was behind this knew where we lived. They might even be waiting for us. The police were an option, but what could I give them? A strange text, a few messages, a blurry video. They'd think I was hysterical. But Mrs. Parker had known something. Her warning had saved us. Whatever happened to her house had happened fast, and she'd found just enough time to warn me before it was too late. I thought about what she'd told me the week before, something about her husband's late nights, about people she didn't recognize visiting their home when he wasn't there. At the time, I'd brushed it off as paranoia. Now I wasn't so sure. I decided to drive to my sister's house, an hour away on the other side of town. She lived in a small farmhouse near the woods, away from the chaos of the city. We could stay there until I figured out what to do next. The road ahead was nearly empty. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy and strange, like the world itself was holding its breath. "Mom," Emma whispered, breaking the silence. "Was that man from our neighborhood?" I hesitated before answering. "I don't know, babe, but we're not going to let him find us, okay?" She nodded slowly, her small hand clutching mine from the passenger seat. Her touch grounded me, reminded me why I couldn't afford to panic. Every instinct I had was screaming to protect them, to keep moving, to not stop no matter what. But as I drove through the winding backroads, I noticed something in my rearview mirror, headlights. Far behind, just at the edge of sight, a pair of lights followed at a steady distance. My pulse quickened. Maybe it was nothing. Another traveler. A late-night commuter. But the longer I drove, the more I noticed. Every turn I took, the lights turned too. Every slowdown, every acceleration, they matched my pace perfectly. "Mom, why are you going fast?" Emma's voice shook. "Just want to get there sooner," I said, pressing the gas a little harder. The road ahead curved through thick forest, and for a few moments, the trees swallowed us whole. The darkness was total, broken only by the rhythmic flash of my taillight. Then I killed the headlights. We rolled forward quietly, coasting in near darkness. The other car's lights appeared again, still behind us, still following. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the kids could hear it. I slowed, pulled off the road into a narrow dirt path barely visible between the trees, and turned off the engine completely. The car went dark and silent. I held my breath. The other car slowed too, its headlights sweeping past where we had turned off. For a second, I thought it might stop. Then, after a tense few moments, it sped off into the distance. I didn't move, not for a long time. Emma's voice came out barely a whisper. "Mom, are they gone?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure. "I think so." We sat there in silence, the night pressing close around us. Every sound, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, felt amplified. My body trembled, the adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. But I couldn't stop, not yet. Once I was sure the road was clear, I started the car again and took the long way to my sister's house, avoiding the main roads. By the time we arrived, it was nearly 2 a.m. The porch light was off, but I could see the faint glow from her bedroom window. I parked the car quietly and carried Luke inside, his little arms wrapping around my neck in his sleep. Emma followed close, clutching my jacket. When my sister opened the door, her eyes widened in confusion. "May, what on earth?" I cut her off. "Please, don't ask. Just lock the doors." Something in my tone must have told her how serious it was. She didn't hesitate. Within minutes, every door and window was locked, curtains drawn. The old farmhouse creaked in protest as the wind outside picked up again. I laid Luke on the couch, and finally allowed myself to breathe. My sister Anna stood beside me, worry etched across her face. "What's going on?" I told her everything, from the text to the video to the car that followed us. She listened in silence, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. When I finished, she whispered, "May, I think we need to call the police." "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "Not yet, they'll think I'm crazy. We need proof, real proof." Anna nodded slowly. "Then we'll get it. But for tonight, you and the kids are safe here." Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone by the window, staring into the darkness outside. The moonlight spilled across the fields, silver and still. For a brief moment, everything seemed peaceful again. Then I saw it, a faint light flickering at the edge of the woods. Like a flashlight. Moving slowly, closer. Another message. From Mrs. Parker's number. "He knows where you are." The message glowed on the screen. "He knows where you are," and my blood turned to ice. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stared at those words, my pulse echoing in my ears. How could he know? We were miles away, hidden deep in the countryside, in a house that even most of my friends didn't visit. Then from outside, the faint flashlight flickered again, closer now, sweeping across the trees like it was searching for something. Or someone. I backed away from the window slowly, heart hammering. My first thought was the kids. I ran to the living room where Luke and Emma slept side by side on the couch, their faces peaceful, unaware. Anna appeared from the hallway, her robe pulled tight around her. "What's wrong?" she whispered. I showed her the message. She didn't say anything at first, just looked out the window. The light was gone again, swallowed by the dark. "I'll call the sheriff," she said, grabbing her phone. But before she could dial, another message appeared, this time, a photo. It showed my car parked in front of Anna's farmhouse, taken from somewhere outside. "He was here. Anna, get the kids," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Take them upstairs. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone, not even me." She didn't argue. She grabbed Luke and Emma, her hands shaking, and hurried up the stairs. I heard the lock click behind them. I stayed downstairs, gripping my phone like a weapon, trying to think. The man from the video had followed us. But how? Had he been watching Mrs. Parker's house? Was this random, or was it personal? I opened the curtains just enough to peek outside. The front yard looked still, the night silent, except for the chirping of cricket. Then from the shadows by the barn, I saw movement. A tall figure stepped out, the same outline from the video. He was walking toward the house. I stumbled backward, heart in my throat, searching for something, anything to defend myself. My hands landed on a heavy flashlight from the kitchen counter. My fingers trembled as I gripped it tight. He reached the porch. The wood creaked under his boots. Then, knock, knock, knock. "May," a voice said softly from the other side of the door. "It's me." My breath caught. It was James. My husband. "James?" I whispered, frozen. "Yes." "Open up." His tone was calm, almost too calm. "You and the kids can come home now. Everything's fine." For a split second, relief washed over me, then suspicion. He couldn't possibly be here. He was supposed to be at work across town, miles away. "How did you find us?" I asked through the door, my voice trembling. He didn't answer right away. Then, "May, please. It's cold out here. Let me in." My husband never called me May. He always called me honey or love. That single detail made every alarm in my body go off. I backed away from the door, shaking my head. "You're not James." The silence. Then, slowly, the voice changed, deeper, lower. "You should have stayed home, May." The doorknob turned. I ran to the kitchen, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I grabbed the landline on the wall and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I whispered the address. The operator's calm tone barely registered. "Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are being dispatched." A loud crash cut her off. The front door burst open, wood splintering. I dropped the phone and ran toward the stairs. "Anna," I screamed, "take the kids and hide." The footsteps behind me were heavy, deliberate. The floor creaked with every step he took. I reached the top of the stairs just as Anna opened the bedroom door, eyes wide with terror. "Go." I pushed her toward the attic ladder. She climbed up, dragging the kids with her. I slammed the attic hatch shut and pulled a chair beneath. Then, I turned around and froze. He was there, standing at the end of the hallway, tall, broad shoulders, a hood covering half his face. But as he stepped closer, the dim light revealed something that made my stomach twist. It was Jane, or at least, it looked like him, but his eyes weren't the same. They were vacant, cold, lifeless. His face was pale, expressionless. "James?" I whispered, my voice cracking. What happened to you?" He tilted his head slightly, like an animal studying its prey. "You shouldn't have left," he said again, his tone flat and mechanical. Then he smiled, a sharp, unnatural smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're not him," I said, shaking my head. "You're not my husband." He took another step forward, reaching into his jacket. That's when I saw it, the thing in his hand, a small device, like a phone, but covered in wires and blinking light. "This isn't about you," he said quietly. "You just weren't supposed to see." The sirens grew louder. He hissed under his breath and turned, running down the stairs and out into the darkness. I didn't follow. I couldn't. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. I couldn't even speak, just pointed toward the trees where he'd fled. They swept through the property, but he was gone, vanished into the woods. When they finally calmed me enough to talk, one of the officers asked for detail. I told them everything, the messages, the video, the photo, and the man who looked like my husband. They exchanged uneasy glances. Then, one of them said something that made my heart stop. "Looks like he was attacked hours ago." The room spun. I felt the world tilt sideways. So who, or what, had come to my door? The officer continued, "And there's one more thing." Her phone was missing, but there was a note in her hand. He handed it to me, sealed in a plastic bag. 4 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "He's not your husband." The air still smelled of smoke, but the sky had cleared, glowing soft pink and gold as if trying to apologize for the horrors of the night before. I stood beside what used to be our home, a smoldering skeleton of beams, ash, and half-melted memory. I couldn't even recognize where the living room had been. All that was left of our lives, fit into a single duffel bag we had carried out in panic. But we were alive, and that was something. The police and firefighters had come through the night, asking questions, marking the area off. One of them found my neighbor's letter, burned around the edges, but still legible. "Get out of here if you want to live." It felt surreal, like a line from a movie that had somehow crossed into reality. They said it was a gas explosion, old pipes, unstable wiring, something that could have gone off any day. But deep inside, I knew it was more than coincidence. When I saw my neighbor that morning, the one who had slipped that note, she looked haunted. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, and her hands trembled as she handed me a small thermos of tea. "I didn't know if you'd get the note in time," she whispered. I smelled gas. I heard a hissing sound, and then I panicked. I hugged her tightly. Words didn't seem enough. "You saved our lives," I told her. "You really did. Every photograph, every childhood drawing, every little souvenir from our trips, gone." But I realized something profound as I stood there with my children. That afternoon, as we stayed in a temporary shelter, my son asked, "Mom, where do we go now?" His voice was calm, too calm for a child who'd just lost everything. I looked at him, his face smudged with ash, but his eyes bright and alive, and I said, "We start over. That's what we do." My kids learned to smile again. My neighbors, even those we barely knew, showed up with clothes, food and comfort. People we hadn't spoken to in years reached out. It's strange how tragedy strips life down to its essential. You learn who truly cares, who stands beside you when everything else burns away. There were nights I couldn't sleep, haunted by the memory of flames licking the walls, the roar of the explosion, the desperate rush into the cold night. I would lie awake, listening to my children's steady breathing, and whisper silent prayers of gratitude. "Thank you for one more day," I'd murmur into the dark. "Thank you for their lives." One evening, about 2 weeks later, I went back to the ruins alone. The fire department had cleared the area. The house looked even smaller now, a blackened memory against the pale moonlight. I stood there for a long time, letting the silence wrap around me. Then I bent down and picked up something, half buried in the dirt. A small ceramic angel. It was from our old living room shelf, a gift from my late husband. Somehow it had survived. I cleaned it gently with my sleeve, and as I held it, a strange calm washed over me. It felt like a sign that not everything was lost, that even in destruction, there were remnants of hope. In the months that followed, I found strength I didn't know I had. We moved into a small rental apartment, humble but warm. I started taking extra shifts, determined to rebuild piece by piece. My children adjusted faster than I expected. They stopped crying over what was gone, and began dreaming about what we could create. One evening, as we sat on the floor eating takeout noodles, my daughter said softly, "Mom, maybe this was meant to happen. Maybe we were supposed to leave that house." I looked at her surprised. "Why do you think that?" She shrugged. "Because now we're closer. You smile more. You tell stories again. You hug us longer. Maybe it had to burn so we could start over together." Months turned into a year, and life slowly found rhythm again. We visited the old neighborhood sometimes. A new family was rebuilding on our old lot. Young couple, full of dreams. I met them once, handed them the small ceramic angel I'd kept all that time. "It belongs here," I said. "May it protect your home better than it did mine." The woman smiled, her eyes soft. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." As I walked away, I realized that home wasn't made of wood or brick or furniture. It was made of people, of love, laughter, forgiveness, and the will to keep going. Now, every morning, I make a cup of tea and sit by the window of our new home, watching the sunrise. Sometimes I still hear echoes of that night, the hiss, the crackle, the distant roar, but they no longer scare me. They remind me of how fragile and precious life is. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can almost hear my neighbor's voice again. "Get out of here if you want to live." Those words, born of fear, became the reason we got another chance. I've learned that life gives warnings, sometimes whispered, sometimes screamed. You just have to listen. We may have lost everything that night, but we gained something far greater: perspective. The realization that survival isn't about escaping death, it's about choosing life again and again, even when everything burns. And so, as I watch my children play, their laughter filling this small new space we call home. I smile, because though the fire took our past, it couldn't touch our future. We rebuilt, not just a home but a life, one that burns brighter than any flame ever could.